Imagine waking up on a Tuesday morning with nothing pulling at you, no notification waiting, no half-finished task gnawing at the back of your mind. Just you and the one thing that matters, sitting quietly in front of you, asking only for your attention. Now open your eyes, look at your actual life, the phone buzzing before you've even sat up, the 11 tabs open in your mind before your feet touch the floor, the conversation you never finished, the project you keep circling but never landing, the years that seem to move faster, the less control you feel over them. Somewhere between those two mornings, something was taken from you. Not your time, something older than time. Your ability to give yourself fully to anything at all. Most people never name this loss. They call it being busy. They call it being tired. They call it just how life is now. But underneath the noise, there's a quieter, harder truth. You have not lost your ambition, and you have not lost your intelligence. What you have lost is your grip. The world found 1,000 small hands and used them to slowly pry your attention out of your own palm, one scroll, one ping, one comparison at a time. The Stoics saw this coming 2,000 years before screens existed, because the enemy was never the phone. The enemy was the undefended mind. Marcus Aurelius sat in a tent on the edge of the empire, surrounded by war, and wrote to himself about the same battle you're fighting now. The battle to stay inside your own head instead of being dragged out of it. You have power over your mind. He told himself, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That single sentence is the entire war, compressed into one breath. Not control your circumstances, not silence the world, control your mind. Because your mind is the only fortress you will ever actually own. This is not a video about productivity hacks. It is not about doing more, working longer, or squeezing another task into an already overflowing day. It is about something much older and much more serious. Reclaiming the one thing that was always supposed to be yours alone, your attention, and understanding that every day you fail to reclaim it is a day quietly subtracted from a life you'll never get to live twice. By the end of this, you will know 10 truths the Stoics lived by to protect their focus, like a soldier protects the last gate of a besieged city. Not because focus is trendy, because focus is the closest thing to freedom a human being can hold. Stay until the end, because the 10th truth is the one that changes how you see every day that comes after this one. 1. Treat your mind like a city under siege. An ancient city was never destroyed all at once. It was worn down, a crack here, an unguarded gate there. One night, the watchman falls asleep, and by morning, the enemy is already inside the walls, and no one remembers exactly when it happened. This is what happens to your focus, and it happens so slowly you barely notice the walls falling. Marcus Aurelius once caught himself drifting and wrote a short, almost embarrassed line in his private notebook. You have been wandering, now you must stop. Not a grand philosophical statement. A commander catching his own soldier asleep at the post, except the soldier was himself. You do this too. You open your phone to check one thing, and 40 minutes disappear into a hallway of nothing. You sit down to work, and your mind quietly slips out the back door while your hands stay at the keyboard. The invasion isn't loud, it's polite. It asks for 1 second, and it takes your afternoon. Here is what almost nobody tells you. The companies designing the apps on your phone employ people whose entire job is to find the crack in your wall. Billions of dollars are spent studying exactly how your attention breaks. This isn't paranoia, it's economics. Your focus has become the most valuable resource on Earth, and you are giving it away for free, one notification at a time. A guarded mind asks a simple question before every distraction. Will this make me who I'm trying to become? If the honest answer is no, the gate stays shut. not out of fear, out of respect for what's inside those walls. Guarding the mind isn't about willpower alone. Willpower is a muscle, and muscles get tired by afternoon. Guarding the mind is about architecture. Begin the morning in silence before the world gets a vote. Choose, before anything else, the 2 or 3 things that actually matter today, and build the day's walls around them. Keep one small space, a desk, a chair, a corner of a room that stays quiet no matter what else is happening, a place your mind learns it can always return to. The Stoics didn't treat stillness as a luxury for people with spare time. They treated it as basic maintenance, the same way you'd check a wall for cracks before winter. Because a fortress that's never inspected eventually falls, not to a great army, but to neglect. When you start guarding your mind this way, something shifts. You stop feeling scattered and start feeling, for the first time in a long while, like the one actually living your life instead of reacting to it. 2. Cut before you add. Here's a mistake almost everyone makes when they decide to get focused. They add a new planner, a new app, a new morning routine borrowed from someone else's life. And for a week or two, it works, because novelty always works for a week or two. Then it collapses under its own weight, because you never removed anything to make room for it. A sculptor doesn't build a masterpiece by piling on more marble. He starts with a block and removes everything that isn't the statue. Michelangelo supposedly said he simply took away what wasn't David. The Stoics understood focus the same way, not as something you construct, but as something you uncover by cutting away what's covering it. Epictetus warned that if you actually want to grow, you have to accept being called foolish by people who don't understand why you walked away from things they still cling to. That's the quiet cost of cutting away. People notice when you stop replying instantly. They notice when you leave the group chat that exists only to complain. They notice when you stop consuming content that leaves you more anxious than when you started. And some of them will make you feel strange for it, because your clarity is an uncomfortable mirror for their chaos. Look honestly at your week. How many conversations are you in that drain you and give nothing back? How many hours vanish into entertainment that doesn't entertain you anymore? It just occupies the space where boredom used to be. Chaos loves excess. Clarity lives in simplicity, and simplicity is not the same as emptiness. It's what's left after everything unnecessary has been removed. This isn't only about your calendar, it's about your mind's landscape. A cluttered room makes it hard to find anything, even when everything you need is technically there. A cluttered mind works the same way. You can have every resource, every skill, every opportunity, and still produce nothing, because there's no clear path from your intention to your action. Marcus Aurelius put it almost bluntly, if you want peace, do less, or more precisely, do only what's essential, and do it well. Not because ambition is wrong, but because scattered ambition is indistinguishable from no ambition at all. Ask yourself, honestly, without performing the answer for anyone, what is weakening me? Who is weakening me? Where does my energy leak out before I even notice it's gone? Write the answer down. Naming it is uncomfortable, but naming it is also the first act of taking it back. The cutting will hurt at first. Every subtraction feels like a small loss before it feels like freedom. But a life with less noise isn't an empty life. It's a life with room in it again. 3. Give the moment all of you, or none of you. There's a strange kind of pride people take in multitasking, as if splitting yourself in 4 directions is a form of strength. It isn't. It's a slow, invisible form of self-erasure. Seneca wrote a line that lands harder every year technology advances. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. He was writing about a man who kept moving from city to city, thinking new scenery would fix an old restlessness. But the same sentence describes a person checking messages during dinner, half listening in every meeting, technically present in a dozen places, and truly present in none of them. Your mind isn't built to hold two full flames at once. It's built like an arrow, most effective when it has exactly one target. Split it, and you don't get two half successes. You get depth traded for width, meaning traded for motion, and at the end of the day, a strange exhaustion that doesn't match how little you actually finished. The Stoics prized presence almost above every other discipline, because presence is where meaning actually happens, not in the plan for tomorrow, not in the replay of yesterday. In this conversation, this task, this breath, given without a fraction of you somewhere else. Modern research has simply caught up to what they already knew. Every switch in attention has a cost, a kind of tax the brain pays each time it changes lanes. And that tax adds up until you're paying more energy for less output than you ever realize. Full presence, on the other hand, produces something almost nobody talks about anymore: flow. That rare state where effort stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like momentum. Rebuilding this is slower than it sounds, because distraction has quietly become a habit your nervous system now expects. Start absurdly small. When you eat, only eat. When someone is speaking to you, only listen. Phone somewhere you can't see it. When you sit down to work, decide in advance what done looks like for this one session, and refuse every impulse to open a second window until you get there. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to do every act as though it were the very last act of his life. Not to be dramatic, to be honest. Because if this really were the last conversation, the last piece of work, the last morning, would you really give it a quarter of your attention while the rest of you drifted somewhere else? Single tasking doesn't ask you to do more. It asks you to stop dividing what little you already do. And when you stop dividing it, you'll notice something strange. The same hours suddenly hold twice the weight they used to. 4. Build a room that fights for you, not against you. You can have the strongest will in the world, and it will still lose, quietly and repeatedly, to a bad environment. This isn't a character flaw, it's how human attention actually works. Willpower is a finite resource that gets spent making decisions. Environment is a structure that removes the decision entirely. You can't grow anything in a storm. A seed planted in constant wind and flooding doesn't fail because the seed was weak. It fails because the conditions never gave it a chance. Your focus works the same way. Plant it in a room full of noise, temptation, and constant interruption, and no amount of discipline will fully save it. Epictetus talked about choosing your company carefully, keeping close only the people whose presence calls out your best self rather than your worst. That principle doesn't stop at people. It extends to every space you occupy. A chaotic desk quietly produces a chaotic mind. A phone within arm's reach quietly produces a mind that's never fully arrived anywhere. The Stoics practiced this with a kind of severity that would look extreme today, deliberately simplifying their surroundings, withdrawing to quiet places to think clearly, walking without any purpose except to let noise settle. They understood something most people resist admitting: you are not as strong as your best day. You are as strong as your environment forces you to be on your worst one. So build the room like it's fighting on your side. Clear the desk before you clear your head. The outer order often has to come first. Put the phone in another room while you work, not on silent, not face down, gone. Keep a visible reminder of what you're actually building toward, somewhere your eyes land without trying. This isn't weakness disguised as structure, it's the opposite. Needing a strong environment doesn't mean your will is soft. It means you're wise enough to stop relying on willpower for battles that architecture can win for you before they even start. Picture a warrior sharpening a blade before the fight, not during it. Picture a writer clearing the table before the first sentence, not fighting clutter mid-paragraph. That's the posture. Prepare the space, and the focus arrives on its own, because you finally gave it somewhere to land. 5. Practice being still on purpose. There's a myth worth killing early, that stillness is passive, that the people sitting quietly are somehow behind the people constantly moving. The opposite is closer to true. In a culture addicted to motion, the person who can sit still, on command, without reaching for a screen, holds a kind of power most people have quietly lost. Marcus Aurelius rose early most mornings before the empire's demands began, and simply sat with his own thoughts, writing to no one but himself. He described his own mind as the most peaceful place he could retreat to, freer of interruption than any physical location he could travel to. Not because his mind was naturally calm, because he trained it to be, the same way you'd train anything else that matters. We've built a world that's almost hostile to silence. Every gap gets filled waiting in line, walking somewhere, lying in bed for the last few minutes before sleep filled instantly with sound, scrolling, something. And because the gaps are never allowed to stay empty, the mind never learns what it's like to simply hold itself without external input. That skill atrophies exactly like any unused muscle. You don't need an hour on a mountain to rebuild it. You need 5 honest minutes, phone elsewhere, nothing performing calm for you, just you and whatever thoughts show up. They'll be messy at first. Let them be messy. The goal isn't a blank mind, it's a mind that, when it wanders, knows how to gently walk itself back to one point. The breath, the intention for the day, the work waiting afterward. The Stoics used stillness as active training, not passive relaxation. They imagined difficulties before they arrived, so fear had less room to ambush them later. They sat with discomfort on purpose, so discomfort lost its power to derail them by surprise. This wasn't about feeling peaceful for its own sake. It was preparation, the mental equivalent of a soldier training in conditions harder than the real battle. Do it once a day, even briefly, and something will happen that surprises most people the first time. The resistance you feel in the first 60 seconds slowly gives way to something quieter underneath it. That quiet, practiced enough times, becomes available to you even in the middle of chaos, because you've built the pathway back to it in advance. Stillness isn't the absence of a full life. It's the discipline that makes a full life survivable. 6. Let what breaks you become what sharpens you. Distraction doesn't only wear the friendly disguise of pleasure, sometimes it wears the face of pain. A hard conversation, an unexpected setback, a wave of doubt that arrives out of nowhere. These can scatter your focus faster and more completely than any notification ever could, because they hijack something deeper than attention. They hijack your sense of safety. Most people, when hit by something difficult, lose their center entirely. The task gets abandoned, the goal gets forgotten, the whole day dissolves into managing an emotion instead of moving forward. It's an understandable response. It's also, according to the Stoics, an optional one. Marcus Aurelius wrote one of the most quietly radical sentences in the whole of Meditations: "The obstacle in the path becomes the path." Not ignore the obstacle, not wait for the obstacle to pass. The obstacle itself becomes the material you build with. Wood thrown onto a fire doesn't extinguish it, it feeds it, if the fire is strong enough to use it. This isn't about pretending pain doesn't exist, and it isn't toxic positivity dressed up in older language. It's a redirection. When someone doubts you, the doubt doesn't have to become anger that eats your evening. It can become the exact fuel that sharpens the work you were doubted about. When a plan collapses, the collapse doesn't have to become despair. It can become the specific information you needed to build something sturdier. The shift happens in one small, repeatable question, asked in the moment. Difficulty arrives rather than hours later. What can this teach me that ease never would have? It sounds almost too simple to matter, and yet this single habit, practiced consistently, changes the entire relationship between you and hardship. Hardship stops being something that happens to your focus and starts becoming something that trains it. Every setback carries two possible futures inside it. One where it scatters you for days, one where it sharpens something in you permanently. The event itself doesn't decide which future happens. You do, in the quiet seconds right after it lands. 7. Replace impulse with ritual. A distracted life is usually a life run by impulse, doing whatever feels most urgent, in the exact moment it appears, one small emergency dragging you into the next, never building anything with real depth, because nothing is ever given enough uninterrupted time to deepen. A focused life runs on something quieter and far less glamorous. Ritual, not motivation, not inspiration, rhythm. Epictetus offered a piece of advice that sounds almost too plain until you actually try to live by it. First, decide who you intend to be, then do what that person would do. In other words, don't wait to feel like the disciplined version of yourself. Build the structure that produces discipline regardless of how you feel that particular morning. Rituals function like anchors in exactly the moments when you need them most, when the pull of distraction is strongest. A fixed wake time, a short window of quiet before the phone comes out. A block of hours reserved for the one task that actually matters, protected the way you'd protect an appointment with someone you respect. A few honest minutes at day's end, reviewing what actually happened versus what you meant to happen. None of these require motivation, and that's precisely the point. Motivation is unreliable. It shows up generously some days and disappears completely on others, usually on the days you need it most. Ritual doesn't ask how you feel. It simply happens, the same way brushing your teeth happens regardless of your mood, because the decision was already made in advance, once, instead of being relitigated every single day. The Stoics lived with this kind of rhythm, deliberately mornings to prepare the mind for whatever the day might bring, evenings to review and correct course. This rhythm is precisely why they could remain steady while everything around them was falling apart. Their calm wasn't a personality trait. It was infrastructure, built one repeated day at a time. Start with one ritual. Just one, held consistently, matters more than 5 rituals abandoned within a week. Once the first one holds, the second becomes easier, because you've proven to yourself that you're someone who follows through, and that proof changes how the next commitment feels before you've even started it. 8. Take charge of the voice that never stops talking. Not every distraction arrives from outside. Some of the loudest theft happens entirely in silence, inside a mind running the same worried loop for the 5th time that day. Overthinking, self-doubt, replaying an old mistake that can't be changed, rehearsing a future that hasn't happened yet. This internal noise can drain more focus in an hour than every notification on your phone combined. Epictetus made a claim that still holds under pressure 2,000 years later. It isn't what happens to you that determines your experience, it's what you tell yourself about what happened. 2 people can face the identical setback, and one collapses into paralysis while the other adjusts and keeps moving. The difference isn't the event, it's the sentence each of them repeated afterward. Most people never audit this internal sentence. It runs on autopilot, usually inherited from old fears, old criticism, old failures that never got properly closed. And because it runs unexamined, it quietly shapes far more of the day than any external distraction does. The fix isn't forcing positivity onto thoughts that clearly aren't true. That approach collapses the first time reality pushes back. The fix is precision. Swap "I can't do this" for the more accurate "I haven't finished this yet." Swap "I'm completely overwhelmed" for "there is exactly one next step, and I know what it is." These aren't slogans, they're corrections, replacing an exaggerated, unhelpful sentence with a smaller, truer one that leaves room to actually move. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself constantly, not for an audience, not for anyone else to read, purely to catch and correct his own inner dialogue before it could quietly run the day without his permission. You can do the same with far less ceremony than it sounds. Name the fear on paper, then answer it honestly, in writing, in your own handwriting if possible. Something changes when a vague, anxious loop becomes a specific sentence sitting still on a page. It stops being an atmosphere and starts being a problem, and problems, unlike atmospheres, can actually be solved. Your inner dialogue will either work for your focus or steadily work against it. There's no neutral setting. Left unexamined, it defaults to fear, because fear is loud and fast and doesn't need permission. Examined and shaped, it becomes the quiet, steady voice that keeps you at the desk after the initial motivation has already worn off. 9. Remember, your focus lives in your body too. There's a persistent myth that focus is purely mental, a battle fought entirely above the neck, while the rest of the body simply waits for instructions. It isn't true, and the Stoics never believed it was. They understood the body as the vessel the mind depends on, entirely, not decoration, not separate, but the actual physical infrastructure attention runs through. Seneca wrote about training the body firmly enough that it wouldn't become disobedient to the mind, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. A body running on 4 hours of broken sleep cannot produce a sharp, steady mind, no matter how disciplined that mind believes itself to be. A body fed poorly and moved rarely produces fog, not clarity, regardless of how many focus techniques get layered on top of it. This isn't a call for extremes, it's a call for basics, honestly kept, consistent, sufficient sleep, some daily movement, even 20 unglamorous minutes. Food that fuels rather than dulls. A little time outdoors, breathing air that isn't recycled through the same 4 walls all day. None of this is complicated. Almost all of it is neglected. The Stoics walked frequently, not for exercise in the modern sense, but because motion cleared thought, in a way stillness sometimes can't. They lived with a kind of physical simplicity that today would be called minimalist, and they did it deliberately, understanding that an undisciplined body eventually drags an otherwise disciplined mind down with it. Notice how focus feels different after a full night's sleep versus a broken one, after a walk versus 3 hours hunched motionless. That difference isn't imagined, it's physiological. The mind you're trying to sharpen is running entirely on hardware you've been neglecting, and no amount of mental technique fully compensates for hardware in poor condition. Strengthen the body honestly, without turning it into another form of obsession, and the mind that depends on it will follow, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped fighting it. 10. Live as though today is the only day. Focus is guaranteed. There is a quiet lie almost everyone tells themselves at some point, usually without noticing they're saying it. I'll focus tomorrow. Tomorrow, once things calm down. Tomorrow, once this one busy season passes. Tomorrow promises abundance and delivers almost nothing, because tomorrow, when it finally arrives, always comes wearing today's same excuses. Marcus Aurelius wrote something almost unsettling in its plainness. You could leave this life right now. Let that fact shape what you do, say, and think. He wasn't being morbid. He was being precise. Urgency, held correctly, isn't anxiety. It's clarity about what actually deserves your limited attention before that attention runs out entirely. Every day spent scattered isn't simply a day that felt unproductive. It's a fragment of an irreplaceable life spent on something that, honestly examined, rarely mattered as much as it felt like it did in the moment. Distraction doesn't just cost minutes. It quietly erodes meaning, one unremarkable, unrecovered afternoon at a time, until a person looks up one day and doesn't recognize how many years passed while they were looking somewhere else. This isn't a call to rush through your days in a panic. The Stoics never lived frantically, they lived deliberately, which is almost the opposite of frantic. Deliberate living asks one honest question each morning: what actually deserves my attention today? And then defends that answer against everything competing for the same limited hours. Seneca observed that people rarely complain about a short life, they complain about wasting a long one. That distinction matters more than it first appears. You likely have more time than you think. What's actually scarce isn't the years, it's the attention you give to the years while you have them. Live this way, and something shifts almost immediately. The notification that used to feel urgent starts to feel small, measured honestly against how little of it you'll remember in 5 years. The scrolling that used to feel relaxing starts to feel like exactly what it is: a slow leak in something that was never designed to be refillable. This is the truth underneath all 9 before it. Focus isn't a productivity technique, it's how a finite life gets spent on purpose instead of by accident. Focus is not a minor skill you either have or don't. It is the edge that determines whether your days accumulate into something that resembles the life you actually wanted, or simply pass by, one distraction at a time, until distraction becomes indistinguishable from a life. Guard your mind like a fortress. Cut before you add. Give the moment everything, or give it nothing. Build a room that works for you. Practice stillness on purpose. Let hardship sharpen instead of scatter you. Replace impulse with ritual. Take charge of the voice inside your head. Remember, your body carries your focus, and live as though today is the only day you're guaranteed to have it. None of these are complicated ideas. None of them require a mountain retreat or a completely different life. They require the same thing the Stoics always came back to: the willingness to notice, honestly, where your attention is actually going, and the quiet discipline to bring it back again and again, for as long as it takes. That's the whole practice, not perfection, return. If this found you at the right moment, there's another video waiting that goes even deeper into the Stoic path, the next step for anyone serious about building a mind nothing outside can easily shake. Until then, stay steady, stay present, and protect your focus like the life you actually want depends on it. Because it does.